Welcome back to Inside Eyewitness News with me, Theto Mahlakwana. We are looking at another issue that is quite interesting and also of great concern if you discern just the great extent of damage and the great extent of danger that lies ahead should these issues that are brought up in the report we're about to discuss, become real in the future. According to the South African Cities Network, the South African population is expected to grow by a sizable 19 to 24 million people. That's more people than we currently have by 2050, with many living in cities or towns. This is information contained in the fifth installment of the Cities Network report on the state of the cities that was recently released. Cities are crucial, of course, as we all know, for global development. Their performance in delivering basic services and positive development outcomes is intimately linked to the well-being not only of their citizens, but also regions, countries, and the world overall. We have seen, for instance, how adverse the problem of potholes, especially in the city of Johannesburg, and I think there's some issues around some cities in Cape Town. Let's not forget also the constant power interruptions as well as water supply shortages. Now, this, of course, all reflects on the state of the cities where we live. And also it raises questions about the future of these cities and the economic pool, which, of course, is an economic pool for many in the country and abroad. We are looking at all of this and a lot more other issues which were uncovered in the research conducted by Kayla Brown and their colleagues over at the South African Cities Network. Kayla Brown is project manager there, who is joining us on the line to just look at some of the fascinating findings that they came across in the fifth installment of this report. Kayla, nothing really surprising there when one considers the kind of revelations that have come up in past reports, but of course the urgency of the need for actual solutions has not passed us either. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Teto. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what the data in the State of the report is telling us is that in many ways, a lot of the different aspects of delivery, including housing as well as sanitation and electricity, is kind of quite stable over the last 20 years. But it means that we're not increasing our delivery at the rate at which it is actually necessary. When you look at how fast these populations are increasing. So it's not as if cities are doing terribly. They're actually maintaining quite a stable level of delivery.
And just looking at, outside of the population growth pressures, which are expected, one would expect that in every city, in every country in the world, there's the obvious reality that cities will grow because the populations will grow. If we didn't have, especially in Africa, the fast-paced population growth that are projected for 2050 specifically as sort of the year and the mark that we are all using to measure the pace of this growth, would there be better responses in terms of services in these particular cities that you looked at?
Right. So I think definitely all cities experience growth. And it's definitely not a bad thing. But what we need to take into account is the rate of that growth. So, much of Europe, North America grew quite slowly, over a much longer period of time. Asia has experienced the bulk of its growth already. And now's the time that South American cities and African cities are really experiencing a much more rapid growth. So, for example, you mentioned the year 2050, the projections are telling us that South Africa's population is expected to grow by an additional 19 to 24 million people, which is growth that is akin to cities like Lagos, some of the biggest cities in Africa. So it presents extraordinary development challenges. When you think about how constrained our cities already are, and especially because of our history of apartheid and the need to undo so much of the infrastructure that has already been built, now with this additional pressure of such vast population increase, it really is extremely challenging. And then, of course, to be compounded by the effects of climate change, which are also only going to increase in the upcoming decades.
And there's also the challenge of informality. There's an issue around informal housing, and this is one challenge that I believe every South African is confronted with, because we see this in the mushrooming of informal settlements all around us. We see this in the devastation that occurs when people just go and find any piece of land wherever it's available to live, as we see in KwaZulu-Natal, where spatial planning did not play a role in some of the communities that were built there. We see rivers, wiping away homes and the likes. These are serious issues which confront all of us, because for as long as we have this mushrooming, settlements and neighborhoods that are not formalized, we will have other, secondary issues that come as an effect of that.
Absolutely. So if we turn to the State of Cities report and the data on informal settlements, it's telling us that in cities like the city of Joburg and Cape Town, almost 20% of people are living informally. And while this number hasn't grown that much, over the last 20 years, it is an overwhelming percentage of the population. And it is to be expected that much of that land that people are settling on is precarious in some form. It's often dangerous land. And the reality is that we haven't really prioritized safe, affordable, well-located land for the people who really need it the most. And we've allowed the commodification of urban land to such an extent, especially in a city like Cape Town, where the city fights against having to build affordable housing in well-located areas. And land is at such a premium. The cities resort to very expensive engineering solutions to build in dangerous areas often.
And that also is linked closely to the issue of public transport, because if I am settled in this informal community on the outskirts of the city and the CBDs that we are all seeking access to find some form of income generating, job opportunity, that public transport becomes another problem. We do not have a system that is reliable in South Africa in general. There is no city, unfortunately, because of PRASA, that can claim that it's got a very effective public transport system. We've only seen trains come back online in recent months, something we should not be celebrating, but we are. And we simply do not have that linkage that brings then those low-income households and low-income people into the main centers through reliable public transport, where people still have to cough out quite a lot of money just to get on in a taxi to make it into the cities. How do we solve this? How does government and policy researchers such as yourselves come to the aid of South Africans in terms of solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head here. And it's really about integrating human settlement planning with transport planning. And in order to do that, we really need to break down the silos that government experiences and to start getting these departments to work together much more closely. There have been changes put in place by Treasury, more transversal reporting approaches that are encouraging this way of working. And so we are, in the institutions, seeing things that are quite promising. And really, I think the solution is ultimately not going to just lie with the city governments themselves alone. I think all of society really has a role to play, and this is something we highlight in the State of Cities report. Every resident of every city should feel, the shared responsibility of what it means to work together towards a resilient and sustainable city going forward. And there is so much that we can do, whether it's taking a different approach to understanding the benefits of what social housing and affordable housing projects can do for a city on the whole. And instead of resident groups fighting against, these proposals coming into their area, I think we need to educate ourselves on the benefits that mixed income housing has for the city, instead of undermining what is the only option we have for creating sustainable and resilient cities going forward. So understanding that link between housing and transport in proximity to areas of economic opportunity is absolutely critical.
Kayla, I can't tell you how many times I've seen politicians going to new sites where they were going to break ground on a new project that was supposed to symbolize this mixed urban living that was meant to, bring poorer people closer to the city. And a lot of those pieces of land, of course, they'll just lie there with no development on them. So I believe greatly that it's not for the lack of knowledge that a lot of these solutions do not come about. And of course, your research may show something different, but my lived experience and the work we do as journalists have also just exposed how this is not the way that we'd expect our politicians to carry out this very obvious solution to the challenge that we face. One more critical thing is, of course, technology infrastructure and communications. We've seen this Wi-Fi hotspot mushroom in a lot of places, but it's unreliable connection, and it's just not as easy as it's meant to be, connecting to the wireless. Where are we with that? Our communities in South Africa, some of the cities that you looked at, progressing in a positive manner that's encouraging?
Yes, definitely. There are fantastic examples of where cities are making small wins in terms of kind of using technology in more innovative ways and to allow greater access to the benefits that a digitized city might bring. So access to Wi-Fi definitely in cities such as Cape Town, eThekwini, have been very successful. Of course, there are technological challenges that cities face with regards to that. I think on that note of technological innovation is also how cities are using data better for decision making, and using data as well as communications to establish better relationships and kind of cleaner lines of communication with the residents that they are serving. And I think we're just kind of seeing the beginning of those projects really taking a much more being taken more seriously in the city as presenting real solutions for co-created development going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that update. Kayla Brown is project manager at the South African Cities Network, who was explaining some of the findings that have come out of their fifth report looking at the state of cities across the country. Also looking at a projection that I think should be considered at the top of mind for all of us, that South Africa is growing by 19 to 24 million people by